Hello and welcome to the Cat House. This is Mr. MeowsAlot, and this week I read Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene. Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist. He was born in Nairobi, Africa, and is of British citizenship. He is a professor at Oxford University for several decades now. He also taught for 2 or 3 years at Berkeley in the USA. Perhaps these days he's better known for his new atheist stance. He's part of what I believe is called the Four Horsemen of New Atheism, which would be the late Christopher Hitchens, the philosopher Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, probably Lawrence Krauss as well, among others. I know there's more than 4 of them, but for some reason they're referred to as that. While he is quite well known now for being in opposition to creationist outlooks, in particular creationism trying to compete and rival evolution in education, and I believe his Richard Dawkins Foundation is hell-bent on, pardon the pun, on preventing education to be sidelined with creationist views. However, as a Darwinist and evolutionary biologist, he is very well known in his field, and very much of that began with The Selfish Gene. He published The Selfish Gene in the 1970s, and you can buy it now in its 40th edition copy as of 2016, therefore 1976 would have been the original publishing date, I believe. The Selfish Gene was a very good read. It is no surprise that this year it was voted by the Science Society of England in a public, it's a yearly public polling, to be the most influential science book to the public readership. And it's no surprise, it's very approachable as a scientific research book. While it is 40 years old, so many of its themes or its thesis is almost today sort of second nature. It's understood that these things are probably true. 40 years ago it would have been eye-opening, much like Origin of Species or Descent of Man by Charles Darwin 150 years ago, perhaps 150 years ago, would have been just as shocking, perhaps, to some people. Now, Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene admits that the title is somewhat misleading, but the main concept that he's looking at is that it's not groups, it's not even individuals that are determining the evolution of the species, but the DNA itself. And he doesn't, in order to tell the tale in his book, he tends to give genes and DNA some kind of conscious agency. But he admits this is not the case. They're just doing what they're supposed to be doing, and what they want to do is to continue on and allow the survivor machine, which he calls the human body, the chance to propagate, to have sex, create offspring, and continue the genes. What's fascinating about the book is that he takes any type of altruistic behavior, so the nice things we do for each other, and says they're not necessarily out of the goodness of our heart, that at the very base of what's happening genetically, biologically, is that we are selfishly trying to continue our genes above others, but sometimes to cooperate, it is in our best interest, or the gene's best interest, to work with others. He has one chapter called basically, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, sort of thing. This is why it would have been shocking 40 years ago, because people like to think that humans are nice by nature. He says that's not the case at all. We are just what we are. Besides that, the human body is not immortal. It's the genes that are immortal, and he says that could have been the title to the Immortal Gene title of the book. One thing I found excellent in the book was his explanation and his look into what's known as the prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma is part of game theory, and he explains it very well. He gives excellent examples, very interesting examples, and furthermore, what's very interesting is today we use on the internet all sorts of discussion about memes. The word and concept of meme originated in this book, The Selfish Gene. He'll be the first to tell you that it's been altered in its meaning to the internet stage and then social media. However, what he's looking at is that culture is fabricated. It's not progress is not necessarily an evolutionary concept. It's man-made, and so culture that is continued throughout a society, throughout generations, is a meme. It's a copied evolutionary process, and it's not likely to continue if the memory of it is gone. It is a popularization of evolution. An interesting point he makes is that the welfare state, I'm covered in fur, the welfare state is evolutionarily not natural selection. It's going against natural selection, in fact, because we are propping up groups of people, for better or for worse. But please keep in mind that evolutionary biology is not about morality or ethics. It just is. Dawkins does get into trouble, according to an excellent article in The Guardian from a couple of years ago. You can find it on the internet. Where they give a long biography of Dawkins and how his tweets are getting him into trouble because he speaks his mind. But he's speaking as an evolutionary biologist, where morality and ethics are not important to evolution. That's important to social progress. That's important culturally. It's important to the memes that he speaks of. Whether we like our natural base instincts, or, as he argues, our natural base drive to promote ourselves, to continue our line, it's beside the point whether we like it or not. It's what it is. You can't change that. We try to with society and culture, but it's all fake. We are going against nature, and it's possible to do that. But I wonder, if we take away our comfortable civilization for even just 3 weeks, how soon would it be before every man has a knife at each other's throat and every woman is selling herself to the strongest man? We would revert back to our basest instincts of survival, and that is survival of the fitter. Cat house. Where are you, baby? I'm not sure which one that is. Anyways, Richard Dawkins, The Selfish Gene. Well worth reading. Very interesting. If you do want to know anything about the prisoner's dilemma, I fully recommend it. The prisoner's dilemma is basically demonstrating that given a short time, we don't cooperate. Over time, more likely to cooperate. But at the end of the day, we look out for ourselves first. And those closest to us that would continue our purpose, even at a subconscious level. Now, the thing about The Selfish Gene in the 40th edition is, yes, you got, I believe it's a new introduction, but you get a new epilogue, the fur, and one of the later editions, not this one, but one of the later editions had added chapters. He's very proud of his book Phenotype, something, which I'll probably try and read next, because it does discuss how we are not necessarily living inside ourselves, that we have constructed a persona to deal with carrying around these genes in a body that we use just for a short time before it goes. Sounds very interesting and complicated, so I'm eager to read that next. I would also like to read several of his other books. He has something like The Absent Watchmaker or something like that, and it's more about how evolution is true and creationism is not. One of the atheist arguments, obviously. Yeah, I fully recommend The Selfish Gene. It is certainly... Did I see it? Oh, hello. Choo-choo. Half of his fur. Look at this. Look at this. Well, you guys always come at the right time to let me know I've been babbling on too long. Anyways, Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins. Good read. This has been Mr. MeowsAlot from the Cat House. Take care.